Hello, everyone. We are back with a weekend live. Happy to have you here on this Saturday. Thank you for coming along. I hope you've had a good week. It has been a busy week here. Happy to say we have many things coming forward for you that I think you're going to be interested in. A lot of really good interviews this week. One of them that I do want to talk a little bit about now.
We are back,
not to
with
be a
spoil
sport,
weekend
you're gonna have to tune
live.
in to see all the stuff, but something
to
that
have
came
you
up
here
in the
on
book
this
that we talked
Saturday.
about.
Thank
Thank you for
to
coming
David.
along. I hope you've had
Talked
a
to
good
David
week.
Shepherd
It
about
has been
his recent
a busy
book
week
on
here.
King David
Happy
and
to
blood
say
guilt.
we have
And there's a
many
really
things
interesting section
coming forward
in
for you
his
that I think
chapter
you're going to be
on
interested
David's
in. A lot of really good
conversation with
interviews this
Nathan,
week.
the
One
whole,
of them
like,
that I
you
do
are
want to
that
talk
man
a little bit about
conversation
now.
thing.
That not to be
It was a reading I haven't really seen, but something in this way before. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. But
if you are here
David,
live,
great to see you. Throw in a comment if you've got a question. We have a couple King David and blood guilt, and there's a really interesting
previous
section
or that have been sent in. And so double audio. Oh, double audio is not ideal for anyone. Can you hear double audio? Because you shouldn't be able to. Okay, this is good to know. Let us see here. Why do we have double audio is a great question. Why? See, why is it? This is the weird thing. Come home. Okay, let's try to get this figured out. It stopped. Okay. Well, I don't know what stopped it. I didn't change anything, but I'm glad it fixed itself. So, thank you for letting me know. And great to see all of you here. Hey, K. Tempest Bradford. Hey, Ozzy Piru. I got your email. Okay, so I want to, I saw your email and your comments there about the question. I want to read through. Hey, Becca. I'm going to read through what you wrote because I've read some of it, but I haven't had time to go through all of it yet regarding the adoption stuff. But I do want to say that I am going to put a couple things in the description down below, a book on adoption narratives in the Hebrew Bible that you may have already seen, but you might find interesting as well, from Bloomsbury. And then another article that I found in looking at this talking about the lack of the adoption narrative in Genesis 48 in Jubilees. And so I'm going to put those down below, but I'm also going to see about maybe scheduling something for an interview to set up to say, hey, let's do something on this, because adoption narratives are one of these things that are interesting. So Azupiru, thanks for reaching out and sending those along. And so if you have a question now, if you want to throw something in, feel free, but I'm going to read through that and get back to you on that. But hello, everyone. Great to have you here on a weekend. As we said, I want to try to get some weekend things in. I'm also going to try to schedule some weekend lives with guests in the future. And so, we can do lives with me and Bob, lives with me and Mary Kate, sometimes solo with just me, and also some that are going to be external stuff. So those will probably be weekend days. I'm talking to some people now, trying to see what might work. So if there are topics or persons that you're most interested in, I can reach out to some people. The easiest way I'd say is if there are topics where you're like, hey, let's have a live around a thing. And then I'll find somebody who is game on a weekend to spend some time, come in and hang out live and answer some questions. So if you're watching this now and you are thinking about somebody, or if you're watching this on replay, happy to have you along on replay as well. And you're thinking, oh, I would love a live conversation about X, Y, or Z. So I'm talking to some people now to see about getting that scheduled. A few other things I want to say thank you. There are some of you that came out last weekend to our event in Iowa City. It was great to see you there. So happy you were able to make it along. If next week, again, if you happen to live in the Milwaukee area, and you are interested, I'll put a link. I brought a notepad. K. Tempest Bradford. I have a notepad today. Now, will I remember to write things down in the notepad the whole time? Probably not. But I'm going to make notes for myself so that I don't forget to link some things in the description. Because, for example, in our interview with, oh my goodness, we just talked about giants. Brian Doak. He showed 2 books on, one of them, Pritchard's Ancient Near Eastern Texts, for example, and another that I totally forgot to put in the description. But I've updated that because somebody left a comment. So if there's ever a book that I do forget to put into the description, also this is a great book if you're looking for something to get. Go and get yourself a copy. But if I ever, we'll deal with that later. if I ever forget to link something in the description that I've mentioned, please, please, please leave a comment. If you see it in the comments, give it a thumbs up or something so that I can make sure that I see it, so that I want to make sure I put those in. And sometimes I forget. I don't mean to. That is my failure and my apologies. But I want to make sure I can get those things in there. So today we're going to link in that Adoption Narratives book and article. /article in description. And I'm going to put in a link down for the Milwaukee event, should you be in that area. And we're also going to have an event in Des Moines. Details are still being finalized, but in March. So if you were interested in our Digging into Easter event that we did last year in Iowa City, we're going to be doing a similar type of thing this year, but coming to the Des Moines area. So a couple things here in Iowa, moving around, and also outside of Iowa for if you're here, but also happy to have you along here. So someone with Sumerian clay tablets. That could be, I think that would be, you want to see the clay tablets. I mean, like, so a thing that might be an interesting way to go about this constellation Pegasus is, I can try to find on a guest to talk about clay tablets. There is someone that I've been emailing who wrote a book. Let me grab it real quick. I'm going to disappear. Okay, so this book came out, I want to say last year, from Selena Winsome, the Library of Ancient Wisdom. It's about the Library of Ashurbanipal. And so I'm looking to see about getting them scheduled to come on. So this would definitely be something to talk about, this type of conversation. But, Irving Finkel, I would love to have on. I can say I have emailed before, but I haven't successfully made contact. But if you know a way, please let me know, because I would love to get a chance to talk to Irving Finkel. But I know that they are very busy with many things. But I'm going to be trying to contact here. Another way that this might work out, though, is the University of Iowa has a large special collections library, and there's a student, you know them if you watch the bonus podcast, Noah, who works with the library and has been doing some research into some cuneiform tablets in the Special Collections Archive, in part because there's like this weird, where did these come from and what's the history of them? So they've been working through that. And as they proceed with that, once they've kind of got like, okay, this is where these came from, and we know what the history or the provenance, because that's one of the questions that they're trying to sort through, was like, where did these come from? I'm gonna ask Noah to come and talk about some of that and what we do or we don't know about these tablets. So that might be another way to kind of touch on to some of this, because like the physical side and that literary side and how all those things come through. So let me say, like, yeah, let's look at clay tablets interview with somebody. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff, like the material evidence stuff, those conversations are so much fun. And I'm definitely, Becca, Noah, we've already talked about this a little bit, but I want to make sure like they've got all the time they need to get all the stuff set up, because they're looking at, it's a lot to go through, right? Because you're dealing with things that they've basically like got a lost history just at the university. So finding the paperwork and when they came in and where they came from and all their university connections and digs and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot that they're digging through with this. So as that develops, we might talk about it a little bit in the bonus podcast as things are working through. It doesn't relate to the New Testament, but that's okay. But I'm gonna ask, once they're comfortable and they feel like they've got the stuff together that they want to come and talk on that. Becca, your question, do we have any Ezekiel specialists? I am constantly having more questions, and I'd love to have a smarty pants explain things. I can reach out to some people on Ezekiel, because I can say I am not an Ezekiel person. But yeah, a couple names come to mind that let me reach out to some people, because these are fun topics. So thank you. And I'll let you know as things progress, but a cuneiform tablet-y type of thing, or a Ezekiel person, happy to look at some of those. Azupir, I see your question here. Sargon was taken in by Aki. Enkidu was adopted. Might the Hebrew adoption sequences be directly carrying on this Sargonic Semitic tradition. So something that is, you should be looking at for a continuation, maybe, let's say. The language always gets a little bit hard when we're talking about, is it continuation? Is it borrowing? Is it one thing or is it another? But if we're looking at story of Moses, right, as you are aware, I'm sure, with the Sargon tradition in this, but Moses' own adoption there from being deposited in a basket that is, technically like it's on the bank of the river. And so that lovely scene that you have from Prince of Egypt where it's like slaloming through the middle of all this stuff, not really what we're getting described, but you do get an adoption narrative there. And so how that might be carrying on that type of tradition, a place to ask questions. And I did, as I was looking through some of what you'd sent over, some of that like specific language parallels, like has this been a place where translation has maybe obfuscated, we could say, some of the terminology or systems borrowing in that's such a like interesting place to press as I think you're looking at in that path to say, have we just kind of adopted a term and a translation pattern that really maybe isn't the fullest version of this that we should be looking at. So I think that there are ways you can see carrying on of those traditions. And then, you always have to lean into, at that point, the questions of, well, why are they doing it? How are they doing it? Is it intentional? Is it just such a broad pattern? Is it a polemic? Is it not? Like all of those things become more and more, in the weedsy as you go. But I think there are, clear reasons to see some of that. I want to say, let me pull up something real quick. As you listen to me type and think at the same time. But like, so because I'm going to say, let me see if I can't put something for you. Although this is probably something that you're probably familiar with given what you're looking at, but for someone who might be interested in the similarities between the Sargon story and the Moses story, as Sargon themselves is said to have been placed into a basket and set in the river and then is rescued. And this is one of those places where you have, how have these things worked through? They're not the only, right? Think of Romulus and Remus as well, of some of these like infants that go out and get adopted and become. This is like a type story, it seems, that has been adapted and evolved in lots of different ways. And what's the origin point? Do we even have the first? Because if you have one that, this is the oldest one that we might have, does that actually mean that's where it started? Or is that simply the oldest one that ended up being preserved? So I'm going to try to find something that's a helpful discussion through. There's a couple things that come to mind that I think might fit this bill. But if I can find a good, clean, like, hey, here's an academic walkthrough on that Sargon-Moses parallel, I'll throw that in the description as well. But if you've never heard about that before, if you do a quick little googly search, there's going to be good stuff from some places. Like there's going to be journal articles that talk about it. I want to say, do I have this book in here right now? Nahum Sarna's book, Understanding Genesis, or maybe is it it's not going to be an Understanding Genesis. It's probably going to be an Exploring Exodus. What am I talking about? Let's see. Hold on. Let me lean behind that camera again. There are just piles of books all over the place in here, and it's so much fun. But then it makes it kind of hard to find some things. It might have something in here. Let's see. The birth of Moses, the motif of the abandoned hero. Okay, let's do a quick little flip through. I see I'm behind on some questions, but I want to look at this real quick to see they might have something in this, because this book, so the birth and youth of Moses in Exploring Exodus by Nahum Sarna, an interesting read, going through some of these types of materials, that has a section on the abandoned hero, the motif of the abandoned hero. And they go through in here, they have Heracles, right? We've got the legend of Sargon. We have some of that stuff in here. So that's something that might be of interest to you as a source. Another one that would probably be of interest to you as a source on this as well is going to be like Kugel's Traditions of the Bible. I'd grab it for you, but the camera's actually sitting on top of it right now. and so I can't. So Kugel's either Traditions of the Bible or the Bible as it was, both of which are underneath this. Those are going to have materials on this as well. Okay, let me get caught up on some chat because I see you in here. Constellation Pegasus, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. Love to have you here. Great to see you. What are the historical? Kate Demis Bradford. What are the historical and archaeological evidences for Nazareth, the place, and why Jesus isn't meant to be seen as a Nazirite? Are those names even connected? Okay, so like a Nazirite, are you thinking here Nazirite vow? Which is, slightly different than like the place name of Nazarene. And we get like, can anything good come from Nazareth as this idea of, the backwatery location out in the fringes, you're out in the sticks. And so you do get, again, within the gospel narratives themselves, the way that falls into, the way that falls into the broader like fights between the Jerusalem system, which is temple and priests and scribes and Pharisees, right? That is like a set of characters. And then this other set of characters, which is Jesus and the disciples as non-temple bound, moving around, and those become, kind of two parties that are at play here. You mentioned their two-part question, but I don't read back. Oh, two parts to that question. Did I miss the first part of that question? Did I miss the first part? Double audio. Sorry, try to scroll back through. See, this is the bad thing. When I'm flying solo, I can lose track of all types of things. There was a part one? I don't see a part one. But if you can put that back in, I'm happy to jump onto that one because I don't know what the part one is there. Andy, an episode about Amorite expansion. Okay, yeah, so like that could be a very fun one to talk about levels of expansion. Let me use this as a jumping off point, Andy, thanks for your question, on episodes like this where what are the power players you're interested in hearing about, large or small, that are in the region that we can know about archaeologically or from literary sources? Because over this year, there's a number of ways I want to try to expand some of the topics that we hit. And I think the easiest way to do that is to ask you who you're looking for. But like one of the things I feel like we've missed on so far that I really want to add in is, episodes about some of these grand powers or players from them. So if they're individual, either names, someone like, well, who is Sargon? Let's go through that. Or some of these power players that might take more than one episode type of thing, but like, let's talk about the Babylonians. This is something that I'm working on getting scheduled in for us this year. But if there's an order of those where you're like, I'd love to hear about this one first, then let us know, because that's something that I think I is very helpful to add in as a part of this. Like, we are talking about the broader history, archaeological contexts, literary contexts, social structures, all of that of a broad region here. And so who are the players that you're interested in there? We have an interview that I just did that will be coming your way in the not too far future about one of these groups, the Sea Peoples, with the one and only Mr. Eric Cline. So happy to have had him on for this. So that episode is going to be coming your way as we look towards some of these. What are some of these names in the world of this space that you know about, that you don't know about, that you'd like to know more about, that maybe you've heard some things, or who is that? So throw us down in there. Kate Demis Bradford, I see your update. Thank you. I've heard from a few admittedly dubious sources, I love the parentheses there, that the village of Nazareth didn't exist until after Jesus' death, and that he's actually meant to be a Nazirite. What are the historical and archaeological evidences for Nazareth, the place, and why Jesus isn't meant to be seen as a Nazirite? Are those names even connected? I don't know what happened to the first one, but I see it now. So this is one of those types of historiography questions where can we place every place name into a thing? Can you identify on a map, this happened here, we're getting names, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And why Jesus is Jesus meant to be seen as a Nazirite, like the Nazirite vow, right? So famously, if you're thinking of what is a Nazirite, think of Samson. The vow that Samson's mother takes, that Samson is going to be a Nazarene, and so you're not going to cut the hair. You're going to abstain from things like wine. You're not going to touch anything unclean. And this is the vow that you take in the dedication here and how you move through. Samson famously is atrocious at maintaining the rules of this, and yet it doesn't really matter. And the comment here about like Nazarites don't drink wine. Jesus apparently drank wine. First thing that come to mind. So if we're thinking of Last Supper here, also think of John's first miracle. That Jesus, in John's context, the turning of water into wine as the first miracle. Now, it doesn't say that does Jesus partake or not partake in there. But is that idea, like within that, you're being dedicated and you're being set apart for or to God in some ways, like, and this is going to be different depending on the text that you're talking about and how it's thinking about Jesus and Jesus's presentation as human or divine and what the Gospels are wanting to do with that, what later communities are wanting to do with that, all of those things. But that might muddle some of the ways they're wanting to distinguish, especially thinking here on John, because we're talking about John right now in the bonus podcast. John takes a very, very different perspective. John takes an extremely high perspective, which, part of why we jumped from Mark into John is to really like hit the brakes hard and say Mark gives you one perspective of things, of miracles, of teachings, of what the Messianic secret looks like, of all this. And yet you also get John, which is a wildly different perspective from the start of the Logos idea and all these things. So part of this, like, does it exist? Does it not exist? That is a place where there are debates, and do we have an identity or do we not? Do we know where these things go from? But not a Nazarene there. But if you reread the Samson story, just not related to that question, just because I'm thinking about this now, and think through like how quickly and how often does Samson break the rules of the vow, right? We know he breaks the rules, but it's just like all over the place. And a part of that is then ask the questions of the text to say, well, what else is it trying to do and why, and how is it going through with these things? How is it using that stuff? Becca, the Sea People, it was so much fun to get to talk to Eric about it. It's one of those topics that's been on the list, and somehow, again, there's like so many of these things where I go, I don't know how we haven't talked about that yet. And the Sea Peoples were one of those where I was like, I don't know, we haven't talked about this yet. And so Eric was very kind to take the time and come back. And in some ways, it was a nice follow-on to our conversation about the Amarna letters, because, right, those precede this. That's like a period, they call it that G8 period. That's what Dr. Cline calls it, where things are really humming in the systems. And then there's that big systems collapse, late Bronze Age collapse. And one of the conversation points or debates has been, are the Sea Peoples the cause? Or are they, a symptom? Or are they a result of this? And Eric's position is, you should see them in some ways. Are they participating in causing some things? Maybe. They're also very much a result of things. Like, it's not very clear. And so, Constellation Pegasus, to jump to your question here, why are they so mysterious? Why is it so hard to track another people or groups of people capable of taking on Egypt on a military campaign? Have not really looked into this much. A part of why they're so mysterious, and we talk about this a lot in the interview, so I'll say a little bit now, but you're going to get to hear a lot more of this in that interview. So stay tuned here. That'll be coming out shortly. And what I'm telling you is the summary of what Dr. Cline was talking about. You can also check out their work on this. If you check out 1177, they've got conversations in there. They've done some good interviews elsewhere as well about the Sea Peoples. But a part of why they're so mysterious is because how do you track or identify a group like this? We do get some mentions to them, right? You have them described in Egyptian monumental inscriptions and reliefs. Yes. We have some physical portrayals of them. We get some names connected to them. Yes. Yet, we don't get things from them. And this is one of those places where you have to ask the questions of what are the Egyptians telling us and how much can we trust it? Think back on our propaganda interview that we did about ancient Egypt. What types of questions do we need to ask of those sources? And if they are telling us the honest truth about some of this stuff, which sometimes they can be, right? They can be doing both of those things at the same time, telling you something valuable and positioning it the way they want. How do you still get back behind that? So if we have a name for a group, can we identify where that group may have come from? And this is one of those, like, so there's an idea of like the Sardanu is one of the groups that gets listed. Are they from Sardis? Maybe. Does that mean they started there and came here? Or that's one proposal. That's Dr. Cline's. Like, some of these groups came from areas. There's these migratory groups that maybe band together. They're not like a one cohesive people thing, but they're like all these groups that have clumped together. Have they moved this way, or were they doing things here, get identified to this, and then head back there and settle there? So like, is that known as a place because you came from there to Egypt and get called that, or you were here and then you ended up over there? And so another difficulty with this is, well, how do we establish something archaeologically to say this is evidence of them? This is evidence of where they came from. This is evidence of what they attacked, like a destruction layer. How do you tie someone to a destruction layer? We have lots of destruction layers around. You don't always know who did it. And someone might claim it who didn't do it, right? So those are some of the things that make it really hard to pin them down. And so they are a murky group that have a backstory behind them, that have been painted as this fall group, like they're the group that gets tagged as the cause in some people's mind of things. But at other times you also see them, and maybe we should be looking at them more as like a migratory group of refugees. That doesn't mean they're not attacking at places and times. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but there's multiple waves too. So how do you distinguish what might be an attacking wave versus what might be a wave that's fleeing drought somewhere else and on a border? So there's lots of things that make that hard. But all this to say, keep an eye out for that interview. That'll be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. It was really fun. So much good information in it that I can't even attempt to summarize right now. So check that one out when it comes out. It should be here in the next, it'll be in the next couple of weeks that one comes out. We've got a great list of things coming out. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for those ones to all come out. I see propaganda in my favorite historical people, impossible, right? There's no way that any of that could be. Take it all. We take it all except the parts that we don't. Why, Andy, question here, why do you think the post-exilic Hebrews said that God didn't appear anymore in the temple, as opposed to just creating myths about him appearing like the prior generations did? Okay, so this is a good question that touches on a lot of things. So I'll try to answer briefly as much as I can. So with in that post-exilic period, right, you are dealing with a large, again, we're kind of talking about systems collapse stuff today again in another way. What happens to the house when the house gets destroyed, or the God who's supposed to live in the house when the house gets destroyed? What are you doing? And so that becomes God turns into, to steal a phrase from Ernest Hemingway, right, the movable feast. And this is the idea where God is everywhere and God's chariot that can move in all directions. And it is yes, in the temple, but also not. And because when that thing is gone, if God was fully confined to that, you end up with a problem. And so that results in a movement out. And you're also going to deal with a struggle in that post-exilic period, right? Think of the return. Not everyone comes back. Not everyone chooses to return. And so you end up with a community that is there and a community that is not there. And so how does that continue to complicate things? Check out our interview with James Moore about the community down in Elephantine, right? They have a temple as well. And so, you have these communities that are connected, but also very disconnected. And so how do you have these touch points? And so that level of distance begins to grow as the scope of things begin to grow, as political and physical and spatial realities continue to change what this is. Now, I couldn't tell you why they chose to do that instead of another thing. Why do they pick that instead of another option? I don't know. But it does result from, right, you have a clear moment of something has happened that's forced us to adapt the systems of how we've been talking about things or how we've been comprehending things. And so now that generates new ideas, and this is the form and this is the way that those ideas take. Why they don't go another way, that's hard, because they could have gone any number of ways. But there's very clearly, something that shifts in how that takes place. Polly, I see your question or comment here. Strange that you were talking about this. I was going to ask if you ever covered the Sea Peoples and the Bronze Age collapse. We talked about, we didn't do we talked a little bit about Bronze Age collapse at the beginning of the interview. that's going to be coming out to set up, like, here's kind of the world of this. We also talk a little bit about the Bronze Age collapse in our Amarna letters interview. Not because the Amarna letters are not connected to the Bronze Age collapse, but as the, like, when the system was humming along here before it falls off the table. So we talked about it a little bit there too, but that might be one of those to say, hey, I can reach out and say, like, let's just talk about this. But in order to talk about that late Bronze Age collapse, there's a lot to get into. I'd highly recommend 1177 as a read point on this, to go through how is this not a one domino falls, but lots fall, that there can be things that result from a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 as this interconnected system suffers hits in a multiplicity of ways that generates this decline that's not overnight, but, you know, it takes time for those things to fall apart, and then takes a lot of time for things to build back up again. So we will be talking about that some in that one. So keep an eye out there. You can take some interest, probably, hopefully, in all of it, because it's very fun. And the conversation definitely circles around that idea of the collapse, and what are the influences, what are the results, how should this change how we're thinking about things by thinking of the collapse as this larger process. It is not a light switch, right? That the LB collapse, and we talked about this a little bit in the naming of the book, 1177, because, you know, Eric had said, this is kind of the conversation of titling a book with the publisher and this, and they might have wanted a different name. And 1177 can give you the idea that, well, in this moment, everything changed. And he's like, no, that's not, you know, but this is a watershed year for this. And so there is a reason that it's titled that, and it's fair that it's titled that, because that is an important year in this. But you do have a much longer process of this that results in things like multiple waves of sea peoples, or multiple waves of migratory patterns, and multiple phases of drought. And we can see that in the archaeological record and the textual record, right? So you get these things coming through. It's like how, cycle back up here a little bit, it's like how post-exilic needed a way for God to follow them into exile. Yeah, when you need a new normal. And so this, yeah, you do get, let me see, I want to pull up a reference here for you, because we were talking about Ezekiel earlier. And so, like, if we're talking about the Merkavah idea, let's go to Ezekiel. I want to say it's in Ezekiel 1. If someone is already way ahead of me here, you might be able to think about this. So if we go to Ezekiel 1:4, I'm switching over to a Bible page. So in the chat, let me know if something gets weird again with audio or anything like that. But in Ezekiel 1, you have this, a storm came out of the north, a great cloud with brightness. I should just pull this up on the parallel page, but it's going to be hard to do this. And so you have the wings of the individuals. Each moved straight ahead wherever the spirit would go, Ezekiel 1:12. They went without turning. In the middle of the creatures, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire, like torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And as we go through that, Ezekiel 1:15, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the four of them. And the appearance of their wheels and their construction, their appearance was like a gleaming of beryl. And they had the same four. There was something like a wheel within a wheel, and they moved around in any of the four directions without veering as they moved. And the wheels. So you have this idea being portrayed here of, yeah, this becomes a movable idea because we have been moved. So are we cut off in being moved, or is this a more expansive idea of what it comes back to? In some ways that looks back towards ideas of the movableness, in a bad word there, of God, after the Exodus and in the wilderness wanderings. And so you have connections between those things. I do want to jump onto a question that we had from left in last time's live that I want to come back to before I jump to something on the David and Nathan here. But someone asked a question last time that I said I would come back to. Why have a growing minority of scholars in the 21st century favored a Hellenistic origin for the Pentateuch's composition? And how do you feel about the hypothesis? So this is something that you will see discussed more and more, especially within European scholarship, of movements of dates. When do texts date to? How do things date? Again, I'm looking at a book behind you, Formation of the Pentateuch, that discusses, different proposals of how I can just grab it again. So like a book like this, Formation of the Pentateuch. This is from Moore-Siebeck. And inside this, you're going to have all kinds of different essays about things from like data on by David Carr. Go check that conversation out. It wasn't about this, but about something different. Data to inform ongoing debates about the formation of the Pentateuch. Or you're going to have other essays write about, can the Pentateuch be read in its present form, the role of dating of things. So like basically anything that you might have a question on, like this book is so wonderful because it's got like all the stuff that you want from all the people that you expect. But one of the reasons why some are proposing for a later and later date is language, is traditions that are known, is ideas of what types of scribal systems may or may not exist. Not everyone's on board. And I would also say within this, there's like levels of nuance that can be hard to. I, for one, if you were to check out, you don't need to go read it, but if you were to look at like my dissertation talking about Numbers 25, I do advocate for late stuff being added in, but that doesn't mean that I think all of it is that. And so that is kind of the balance point that I think you're going to see in a lot of this, where not everyone is saying that everything is late. Some people are. Some people are arguing that everything is a late origin. And I don't know that really, I don't find that super compelling. Like, I don't find it extremely compelling that all of it is as late as some people want to say it is. But I do find some things compelling that some of it is a lot later than maybe we've always said. And some of it may be, heavily going through changes at later periods of time. Something that can introduce questions is like, well, what does this know about other literary forms or philosophical schools? All that kind of stuff is why people ask those questions. And that doesn't, again, a distinction here is that doesn't necessarily mean that it may not have like a pre-literary history. There are people who argue maybe it doesn't, but there's like sometimes full extremes and sometimes like lots of little steps of nuance before you get to that extreme. So the absolute minimalists drive me up a wall, as their positions are often entirely unsupportable and based on an ignorance of historical linguistics. From Simone. Yeah, so some of this, there are difficulties with trying to put everything. I think that there are difficulties with trying to put everything so late. But I do think that there are reasons to look at, sometimes little things might slide in that are indications that maybe something is later than the thing before it, how we have that development over time. So there's different ways why people go through, but Becca, I see your question here about books on the formation of the Pentateuch that are maybe more accessible at a less academic level. Yes. I think something that you might find interesting. Hold on. So this one is going to be more expansive than that, and it's still academic, but it's not going to be it's not like the most. So this is about the formation of the Jewish canon, which you might find interesting. It's more than just the formation of the Pentateuch here by Timothy Lim. You might like that one, but thinking too, like I would say if you liked our interview with David Carr, they've got a lot of really good stuff. Again, that's academic, but some of that can vary one level or another of how technical. I'd also argue though, I think sometimes there can be, not every academic writer is as, approachable as another. But some of them are much more approachable than you might think. And so I'd say check those out. But let me look over, let me look and see about a good, like, couple one-stop shops on formation of Pentateuch that aren't like that aren't going to be buried in footnotes. Because I think that's one of the things when I think of an academic, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong here, but like if half of a page is a footnotes, I personally love that. But that also to me, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is going to be, that's going to be kind of probably what you're not looking for. So let me say, I wrote it down, K. Tempest Bradford. I've been using the notepad this whole time. I will throw some things down in the description. I'll put the links to these books that I'm talking about today in the description too. Something that might be in touch with this, not in the same way, but I would say one of my favorite books that I love to recommend is James Kugel's The Bible as It Was. The Bible as It Was is highly accessible. The expanded version of it, The Traditions of the Bible, is more technical, but just because it gets a little bit longer. But in The Bible as It Was, Kugel goes through and hits a lot of these, like, here are these big stories that you know from the Pentateuch, and talks about, like, hey, here are other traditions that have grown out of that story, or divergences from that story, or things that might have influenced that story. And it's like each of those hits is accessible, and it's short, and here are primary texts and then short conversations on it. So I think that would be a great one that you might like. Yes, Simone, I see the Yale courses on YouTube. Absolutely. Go and check out Joel Baden's course on that. There's an older one that's just audio as well that is also good, like going through any of those, but I think those are definitely, you don't have to read to go through those, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be brought up that you can go and read to go through those ones. That would be good for those. The Bible as It Was is, I think, like, that is one of my top recommendations for people when you're like, hey, I'm wanting to start to get into the things behind the things. Start there, you're going to love it. And there's going to be a lot of ways that you can find out what you really love the most to then chase down. Starting with something like this, I guess, if I'm honest, starting with something like this this might be the perfect starting point for you too. But this is going to like really narrow in specific areas that might miss the question that you want to actually talk about. And so might cause you to miss out on one of those things. Andy, good free resources for learning Hebrew. Go check out Kipp Davis's channel. They read Hebrew every week. Every Thursday they do a live and they read through. Go and check that out. That'd be my first place to say, hey, you're going to have a lot of stuff here. Check that one out. I know there's going to be keep tabs on Kipp, because there might be some other things as they go through of other ways you might be able to get access to that kind of stuff. But that would be the first thing that I would recommend, is to do that. Also, if you get if you're looking for a book, now a free way to go and do it yourself. I guess it's at school. It's in my office there. But I can put down some links to like Hebrew books. Digital Hammurabi, yes, they also have a Hebrew course. That one, yep. Do they just have part, or have they like split it up? I can't remember how they did it. But yeah, check out Digital Hammurabi, check out Kipp Davis as two places to start with. And I'd say keep an eye on if you have interest in more ways to do this, the religion department from Andrew Mark Henry, Religion for Breakfast. I hope I'm not like totally speaking out of turn, but they're looking at ways to expand, and they're doing courses and they're doing guided readings and stuff. And they have talked about trying to look at language stuff as well. So keep an eye out there for that. The first Hebrew primer. So Simone, I that was exactly the one that I was looking at. This was the very first Hebrew book that I had, like for a starting point. I would also highly recommend Weingren's Hebrew Grammar as a really good one. I would, if you're looking for another thing that's maybe even a little bit more. Let me see if it's over here. Hold on. So this one too, a biblical Hebrew reference grammar. If you're looking for something more technical to go through and give you this one is much more technical than This is much more technical than this. This is going to be a great starting point for you to go through and say, hey, I'm interested in having like, you're going to get small readings. You're going to have vocab and exercises. Like there's going to be practice books. You can also get something like, should you want to be able to check, you can get an answer book to check through and say like, hey, here's what goes along with that. Am I progressing? Am I having this stuff right? As you want more, something like this, Biblical Hebrew Reference Grammar by Vandermeer, and now like this is going to be a good one that gives you more specifics to say, I'm looking for instances or examples of a specific rule or how more technical language comes in. This would be a good one that you might be interested in as well. Let me keep adding books to the stack here that I'm going to need to cite later. I'm also looking behind here, going back to your question, Becca, earlier. The Formation of the Hebrew Bible by Carr is one that I'd say, going back to your Formation of the Pentateuch one, that's going to be one that you probably would be interested in. And sorry, there's books everywhere. I'm trying to look to see. Yeah, maybe I'll leave those as the recommendations for now, but I'll put Formation. Oh, the book list is going to be long this week. But that's good. Those are wonderful things. So check those out if you're looking for some Hebrew. You got the whole Hebrew. Yeah, I mean, I like the more books you can get, like language books, the better off you're going to be. Like going back over again and again from a different starting point to say, hey, let me read this another way. There's another one that I have. Oh, what is it called? There's another that I'll put down below as well that feels more like a Greek grammar. Something that can be very helpful is also identifying, how do you think about language? How do you need to learn language? Do you need it broken down into like hyper technical clause structures and terminology? If so, find the grammar that aligns with how you need to understand grammar. So if you're coming to this from like, you love English grammar and you want to talk about dependent clauses and you want to talk about, find that type of grammar. If you're like, I hate everything that is about grammar, then you're going to want to find something that is much more like, we're introducing you to the language through the practice of it. And don't worry so much about the technical terms. We'll bring that in later, that you can find those. They're all going to exist. You're going to have a whole bunch of different options. Find the one that makes the most sense. And then once you've gone through that one, honestly, start again with the other version, because you'll be able to move faster. You're going to know things, but it's going to introduce different concepts and different orders or new terminology that you'll find helpful in a different way. So if you're learning on your own and you're like, oh, I went through this whole book, get another one and go through the whole thing again. And at the same time, like, just start reading as soon as you can. Go to something like Kipp's Hebrew Live and just start reading along, because you're going to find things and you're going to learn things as you're reading, because you can get to reading a lot quicker than you think you can. Same thing with something like Greek. If you're interested in Greek, there's lots of good resources, and a lot of the grammars there are much more technical, but you can get to reading a lot faster than you think you can. But yes, books everywhere, books. It's the best. Like, it's so much fun that you do have books everywhere. The downside is trying to keep track of where they all go. And also, I have to return so much stuff to the library at some point in time. Today's not that day, but a real benefit of ending up, at a university with a big library and, interlibrary loans is you can get a lot of books for research purposes. And sometimes you have a very, very long borrow period. And so I have stacks of books that are going to have to go back at some point in time, but I keep holding on to them and hoping that nobody needs them right now. So I'd say that's something. Now, something else I would mention on Hebrew, and I think maybe I'll wrap it up with this one. If you are interested, I would highly recommend Kipp and Digital Hammurabi as the place to go. But if there's ways that you're like, it's something that I've talked about with Mary Kate and with Noah in the bonus podcast of like, we can bring in a little bit of language into those in ways that's helpful, not over the top. But I think we're probably going to go into doing that. Noah and I are starting to do that with John in the Greek there, but just in little bits at a time. Because sometimes that's very important, like nuance, to unpick coming at it maybe like from another way to unpick our reading of the text. Because just by flipping how we're wanting to translate or what really is or isn't there in the language, it can break you out of the reading you think you know and find the reading that it might be totally different, or lots of variant readings that might open up by going back into those things. So I measure books in kilograms, not volumes. I mean, sometimes. Like we can talk about the bookshelf quickly if you're interested. And I would argue the layout is chaotic, but it makes sense up here. And that's the only place it needs to make sense, is up here, really. So back behind you, there are, in that corner, this is the writing area over here. In that corner back over there is where the biblical texts are. So my Hebrew Bible, my Septuagint, BHS, all that kind of stuff. That's where Josephus lives. That's where like my favorite copy, the NRSV Oxford, nice hardback red one that got coffee spilled on it when I was a middle school teacher, but it's okay because I taped it back together. Those things live over there. And then right behind you is a stack of books that are like, these are ones that I reach for a lot. And this is stuff like Roots of Rabbinic Judaism by Boccaccini. These are things like Frank Moore Cross's Canaanite Myth and Hebrew Epic. This is Society and Promise by Schneidewin. This is Formation of the Bible by Carr. And then there's the stack of books that the camera is currently sitting on, which are also books I reach for all the time. Epic to Canon by Cross, How the Bible Became a Book by Schneidewin, which, Becca, if you haven't read that book, check that one out too. How the Bible Became a Book. I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner, but check that out for formation questions. And that is extremely accessible, extremely accessible. Traditions of the Bible. Then down below, there's a bookshelf, which is all stuff that's related to dissertation. And so this is stuff on Numbers and Joshua and Judges and Psalms and priestly violence and the Targums and Covenant in the Persian period. Oh, that's a really fun book too. So those are down there. Then over here, we have more Bibles, and then we have more language things, and then we have some historical stuff because I did go to seminary, and so I do, like theology isn't the thing that I do, but it can be helpful in unpacking arguments that come forward to have a background that those things. Then we're going to get into stuff that is more like text-based, and things that are, bridging the gap between academic stuff lives up there. And then we've got like literature and just books. Like reading for fun is also very important. So if you're, don't just read academic stuff, but read for fun too, especially if you want to write. Like that's one of the best recommendations that I got in grad school was don't forget to read nonfiction. Don't forget to read fiction. Don't forget to read poetry. Read anything that's not academic that you like. Because if you're only reading academic writing, then your writing is going to become just academic writing, which isn't bad, but you're going to want to write more than just that. You're going to need to at times write and talk more than just that. And so continue to read stuff that isn't just academic, and it can help reset your brain and make you ask questions different ways. And it can also be really helpful in breaking you out of the reading pattern that you had when you come to the text. Because by reading something like fiction where you don't know what's coming, you're retraining yourself to ask questions of characters and lines in trying to figure out what already happened or what's going to happen. And a trap that I think we fall into just so much without thinking about it is we know where the story's going, or you think you know where the story's going, and so you miss things. So reading fiction can be very important. Yeah, this is a candle. This little red gnome is a candle. I've never burned it. It's a gift from Hannah, and so it's right here. So those are some of the books that have, that are around. But organizing books, no, Constellation Pegasus, it is not for the faint of heart. And the organization pattern changes whenever I've discovered that I've lost track of where things are, then things get reorganized. Now there's more books in the office, and those are books that have been, part of interviews or those things. So there's a lot of stuff there too. And then also just like things on things on things, articles on articles. But I will leave that there. I have a lot of books to add to the description. I'm not going to include every book that I just mentioned. I will include the books that I held up. So this little stack of books, let's say these are all going to be in the description. Okay. So if you're interested in finding more information on this, I'm also going to add in there, James, put these down and don't knock things over. Kugel's stuff. I'll put those into the description, and Schneidewin. So I'll put a number of things down there just as like, here's books that we talked about that you might find interesting. If you're watching this on replay and you have a book question, send it in. If you have a question, send it in. We will be back live in person on Friday next week. Back to Friday. I think it'll be me and Mary Kate, but we'll find out. And I'm going to try to stick to that 1 o'clock window. That feels to be a nice time. And so we'll see you at 1 o'clock. But for right now, I'm going to leave this here. Thank you everyone for coming along, hanging out, asking some questions. I love to talk about books. Something that let me know if you're interested in. Again, always just throwing you a million things to let me know about. But, did I freeze? Maybe not. If you're interested in more book-based stuff, let me know. Like if you're interested in guided reading-y kind of things, or like, hey, let's walk through a book. There's ways that we can figure out how to make that work, whether that's alive, whether that's stuff with courses over on Patreon. It's kind of like what we're doing with the bonus episode, but different ways to go through, texts. Like here's a scholarly reading and make your way through. So let me know if that's something you're interested in and a type of book that you might be interested in, and we can figure that out as we go. But for now, Simone, I did lose you in the shuffle. If you put it in there right now, you have 28 cartons of books in the storage unit. It does. Putting books into boxes is like a heartbreaking thing to do, because I always go like, I don't know if I packed these right. And then it's going to be so heavy. I'm looking back through your previous things. And yeah, I think we have a very similar reading pattern here, because you're that one, and then Weingren, and then the reference grammar. Those are my 3 go-throughs as well. But Simone, if you throw your question in right now, because it did get lost in the shuffle, but I'm happy to tag that before we close and to use that as the last thing. If you do want to put it into the comments, though, I will come back to it. So we'll say I'll wait a second here, because I know there's a little bit of delay between life and internet life. But things to keep an eye out for. We're going to have an interview with David Shepard about blood guilt in the story of King David, which was really fun. We're going to have that interview with Eric Cline and the Sea Peoples coming out, which was really fun. We are going to be having, we have a conversation coming out about Stolen Fragments, the book by Roberta Mazza, coming out with things. We have like so many fun things. We've got a thing on creation accounts with Joseph Lamb that's going to be coming your way. We have a thing that'll come out on Monday about sea monsters with Esther Hamori. Go check out God's Monsters if you haven't read that book. Extremely fun read. Check that out. I will be looking at scheduling some of these conversations as well. So if there's other topics you want to know, let me know. But for now, we will pause here. Andy, thank you so much. Yeah, if you like things, hit the channel, hit the like button, let us know. Come back around. We'll see you live next week. If you're interested in more, again, you can check out the bonus podcast, walking through a chapter of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament one at a time. Stolen Fragments is an incredible book. I think I need to do like a book video every month. Like, here's some good reads from this month. That's really fun. So thank you all for coming in, hanging out, taking some time out of your weekend. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to hopefully seeing you back again next week live. And again, if you're watching on replay, hope to see you in the future at a live maybe. If not, love to have you on replay. Leave a comment down below and we'll grab a comment or 2 for next time's live. But for this week, we will leave this one here. Until next time.